We were tasked with breaking a taboo on stage. In a previous video, I've said about my performance, and in this one, I'm going to be talking about watching the other performances and how it made me feel. Um, the first one we watched was all you saw was someone dead, well, dead in a sense, with a rope around their neck attached to a pole above that, like on the ceiling. Obviously, it was to do with mental health and suicide. Um, because it was a still image, it wasn't that effective. Like, you could see it was quite hard to watch just because you knew what it was meant to be, but also because because the event had already happened and you were just watching like a dead body hanging there. It wasn't very effective in making you feel shocked or making you feel sorry or like motivated to do anything. They said it was to do with male suicide, and while I got that it was to do with suicide, I didn't, even though it was obviously a man that was that hung himself, it didn't really mean anything to me in the sense that it was different to maybe if it was a woman there. I think if they showed the events beforehand and maybe why they were doing it, if they had like a mini monologue before they did it, it would have been a lot more effective in conveying the actual message and making the audience feel what they wanted them to feel. Quite a few were fairly similar. A few were about throwing up, and two of them were about throwing up and then eating what you threw up. Which the meaning seemed a bit vague. It was more like the harm you do to yourself and yet you can't stop it, and it's a cycle that repeats itself. I feel like those two, they obviously definitely broke taboos on stage. It was quite hard to watch, but it didn't make you feel anything for them themselves. It was more just feeling a bit disgusted at watching it. I prefer the route of going kind of the mental way and a bit more making the audience want to feel something rather than just kind of watching something disgusting that they don't really want to watch. So while they were very good at breaking the taboos, they weren't very good at, in my opinion, of actually making the audience feel anything and want to do anything about it. It felt like we were just watching something disgusting happen on stage and then it immediately just stopping and it was all fine again. I think there was one person that did it about rape, and she was facing the back, her hair was a bit messy, and she had these little cherries and some spam, and she was talking about the story of what happened and using the two food items to kind of convey messages a bit more. So at one point she kind of popped the cherry, meaning the euphemism of that phrase. And then she also went on to say that she wanted to hurt him and she wanted to kill him and rip him apart. And when she was saying that, she was spooning out the spam and messing about with it and forming it in different ways. And while the actions definitely complemented the words, I feel like the words could have been stronger because they weren't very shocking in a way, because a lot of them were just fairly simple ways of saying what she wanted to say. And while it was a very hard thing to hear, it didn't give you any images, which I feel would have been a lot worse to witness. So she said if she didn't really go into the gruesome details, which is what I think it needed. She very much skipped over the details and went for more what she wanted to do to him rather than what he did to her. And I feel like if she wanted to get the most reaction out of the audience, she could. then she definitely needed those details to allow the audience to picture what she was saying in their minds, to really understand what she might have gone through and feel the way she does towards it. The one immediately after, while it was a bit disgusting in a way, but it also allowed for that thought of the audience. I feel like this was the most effective one. It had there are a few parts in it that weren't quite as much as I wanted it to be, but for the most part it was quite effective, as it was this man in the middle, and he had, I think it was meant to be a shard of glass in his hand, and he had his other hand clutching his stomach, and there was a bag with some red liquid in it. And eventually, as he started speaking, you could figure out that he had taken out his kidney himself to try and sell it for money, potentially either through the hospitals or through the black market. It wasn't specified. And he was going on to say that because he did it himself, that the place he was selling it to no longer wanted it, and he did it for nothing. And he was mainly on the floor, and then this other person walked back behind him. So he then ran up to him, showed him the bag, and started like shouting at him, like, why did they do this to him? And then it seemed as if the other man just sort of looked a bit disgusted, tried to run away. And then eventually the bag got thrown on the floor and it split open. That was obviously the most disgusting part of it, because there was red liquid going towards the audience with the little bits of meat inside that was supposed to be the kidney. So that was the most shocking in a way. I don't think it was purposeful, but it was very effective in making the audience think about what they would have done if they were in the other person's shoes that was just a bystander. I think what didn't work very well is when the lights were up, you could see that the other person had some sort of fake vomit that they threw up. But because the lights were quite low and there was no lights on him particularly, you couldn't see that he did that. So I feel if they were to do it again, maybe make it more obvious if they're going to stick with that, and have the lights a bit differently so you could see him. Or they could change it completely to convey their meaning a bit more. In that the bystander, instead of actually paying attention to him, he'd just stay there casually throughout the entire thing, knowing that it's going on but not caring, which effectively is what their meaning is that these people are doing these horrible things to try and just live and get by and get the food that they need, while other people are perfectly fine just watching them, not caring what's going on. Overall, I think everyone did fairly well at breaking the taboos, but some people were a lot more effective at conveying the meaning behind it and getting the audience to be involved a lot more. I think the most effective ways of doing this would be definitely having speech, because that allows the audience to picture it in their minds rather than having it shown to them, which is obviously a lot more effective because there are limits to the stage in which you can't show someone dying and you can't always show nudity. So having the words allows the audience to picture it for themselves and makes it a lot more effective and allows the audience to actually think and engage with what's going on. So I think the people that used words effectively were the ones that were the most effective.